So much copy these days is kind of first draft. Like, yeah, okay, you got it down on the page. Now it needs to sing. Now it needs to be magical. Now it needs to grab the attention and hold on to the person's attention for dear life. I'm not sure it's even necessary to be a really good writer in order to write copy. Ogilvy once said, I'm not particularly a great writer, but I'm a hell of an editor. The ability to look at your own copy from the outside, to look at it as if you're the prospect, or to look at it as if you didn't write it. Because I think a lot of times we know boring copy when we see it, but somehow we don't know our own boring copy when we see it.
What do you think of how people are applying the theory of marketing to copywriting, and is there a downside to that sometimes?
It's incumbent upon copywriters, I think, more than ever, to be more than copywriters, but to have some expertise in media, in marketing, in funnels, what works, what doesn't.
You really have to know the market.
And why wouldn't you do that? You know, it always amazes me that people write copy and don't know what the market is really like. It's hard to get better at writing, but it's really easy to know more than other people about the product, about the market, about the science behind the product. The more you know, the more you're able to do that. The more you understand the market, the more you can write with, from your heart to their heart.
How would you go about learning that for the first time?
Study it. So study story, study screenwriting. What we do is basically has a lot in common with screenwriters, because screenwriters know about putting pictures into people's heads. They don't explain things, they show things, right? They know how to create suspense, to understand creativity more clearly. Everything's about creativity in a certain way. Copy is constantly being creative. The reason we like certain copy is a lot like the reason we like certain music, because you hear a theme and then that theme is developed and it's like, oh, there's that theme again, right? Right? It's like it gives you a certain pleasure, and then it comes back at the end and you go, there it is again.
You were saying that there's only so much you can do to improve the writing of the craft, but I'd love to know, what is that next step then? Beyond the writing of the craft, beyond learning about the marketplace, how do you go about taking the craft to that next level?
People are very complicated. They don't do things for the reasons we think they do things. They've got a lot of secret stuff going on. A lot of what I help people do is to study things sometimes that aren't even copywriting related. And that's things like psychology. I don't know how people can write or try to be a copywriter without.
Okay, so today I'm here with David Deutsch. Thanks so much for being here, man.
Oh, my pleasure. Looking forward to this.
So it's really cool that in the early days of my career, I actually learned quite a bit from you. And you were one of the first people that helped me to improve at creating ideas. And I went through some of your material in the early days of my career. And, I think everybody that I've worked with that's a very good copywriter always has amazing things to say. I know that you've helped your clients generate over $1 billion in sales. You've worked in lots of different industries and lots of different types of businesses. And so you have a lot of experience. And yeah, I'm just very curious to know, your perspective on how things are today and to get your thoughts on where things are going and how people can improve a copy. So thanks for joining me.
You're welcome. I can't wait to hear those things myself.
Well, let's start with this. There's a lot of copywriters today that are closing clients at these new types of information businesses that run on social media, where they have a coach on social media, that they got an Instagram account, or they have they're running meta ads and they're closing clients like that. And those are some of the top clients today. But that wasn't the case when you started copywriting, right? There were very different types of businesses that were hiring copywriters. So what did it look like in those days when you would close your clients? What do those clients used to look like?
I've done so many different types of advertising and copy. From my ad days at Ogilvy and other agencies to direct response days. And when I first started working in direct response, and to some extent that's still true today, it's largely referral. Large direct response companies, maybe more so years ago, kind of help each other. Boardroom talks to Agora. They talk to Rodale. They say, hey, there's this copywriter we worked for. He's great. You should work with him. Word kind of gets around. So, a lot of it was from people saying who wrote this copy, when there was a successful new control for someone. Nowadays, it's still partly that, but it is partly people find me on social media. I think Procter & Gamble originally found me on social media. Someone from Procter & Gamble that kind of went into our world a little bit.
Yeah, that's a different perspective. I haven't actually thought of that. That's a really great way to get clients, actually. You've got a really great piece of copy that's top performer. People will ask, yeah, who wrote this piece of copy? I want to know who the copywriter was.
Yeah. Yeah. It's harder and harder these days. I wish we could sign our work sometimes. But I guess that's what social media is for, is to kind of publicize what you can. I should probably do more of that. But, um, you know, one's always hesitant to take too much credit for things, which, you know, we like to think copywriter is the sole determinant of success, that copy is the sole determinant of success, when in reality, a lot has to do with the product itself. A lot has to do with the marketing that the client puts behind it. How intelligent is their media buying? And I think that's one reason why it's incumbent upon I'm kind of veering off a little bit here, but I think that's why it's incumbent on copywriters to learn as much about that stuff as they can, because not every client is really good at marketing, is really good at media buying, is really good at, at knowing what to tell copywriters, what research to give them. And so it's incumbent upon copywriters, I think, more than ever, to be more than copywriters, but to have some expertise, in media, in marketing, in funnels, what works, what doesn't, what should the first upsell be,
How would you go about learning that for the first time?
I think explore, what the best people are doing, the most successful companies. What is, I don't know who comes to mind, V-Shred or, whoever it is in our business. What are they doing? What are they, what does their funnel look like? And to study it. And of course, there's so much on the, on the web these days, or on AI, to just be able to say, what makes a good funnel? Like wherever you feel you're weak, right? What makes a good funnel? Or what are the 10 things I should know about media buying? I'm a direct response copywriter, right? So right away, now it's going to be more curated for you. I'm a direct response copywriter. What do I need to know about media buying so I can help my clients utilize my copy more effectively?
It's that curiosity. It's something I've noticed with a lot of top copywriters. They're really looking for things from a place of how they can learn, not how they can make more money. It's like the money is not the first step. It's always a secondary thing after. How are these businesses doing this thing or that thing, or what are they doing here? I'm curious about that. And then when you learn how that thing works, then maybe then the money follows afterwards, right?
I do think it's partly curiosity. I think it's also drive. I think the best copywriters are pretty much all pretty driven, in terms of, I'll be damned if my copy is going to not succeed because they're not buying media more effectively. So I'm going to stick my nose into that. I'm going to help them with that. I'm going to know about media buying, because clients are good at different things. Some companies succeed because they're good at media buying, right? And they buy media really cheaply, and the copy is okay, and so they thrive. Other clients are great at copy. They have a great copywriter, they get great copy. They're not so good at media buying, so they thrive to some extent. Other companies have a great product that kind of sells itself, and they thrive. And so for each of those, for you to come in there and just write better copy may not be enough. Maybe you also have to help that client with a great product that kind of got to 5 million, 10 million, wherever they got to, thanks to that. But now they can't grow beyond that. You've got to help them with that, with that media buying. You got to know how to at least guide them. Have you tried this? Have you looked into this? Not like, oh, let me do a media plan for you.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think a lot of copywriters that I've had a similar conversation with, and I said, this is a skill that, might be necessary. You might have to, give your clients some suggestions on offer creation or optimizing their existing offer or doing something that doesn't feel directly like copywriting. A lot of the time they say, well, people don't know me as that. I'm just known as a ads copywriter, or I'm just known as a funnel copywriter. Like, do I have to put that in my brand? Like, how do I frame myself? And, I have a few thoughts on this, but I'm curious what you think of, how do you demonstrate that you have that expertise that, the client should pay attention to you? Because a lot of businesses these days they see copywriters as more of a, employee commodity sort of,
Yeah.
we just got to get the copy out there, right? But there's so much more to this work.
I think a lot of that is in people's heads. People see you as what you help them see you as, right? If you go in
Mm,
there with good suggestions, they see you as a person that offers good suggestions for marketing, for media, like you say, offer creation. I think part of it is, I think questions are so powerful in this regard. Asking good questions. Where are you buying media? Where's your traffic coming from? Have you considered this? Have you considered segmenting more? Or tell me about your segmentation efforts. Oh, you don't have any segmentation efforts. Well, have you
mm,
considered having I
mm,
mean, if you listen to
uh,
someone like Jay Abraham do a consultation, all he does is ask questions for a large part of it. But they're brilliant questions. Have you considered working with your competition and taking the leads that they can't sell and you give them the leads you can't sell and doing a trade? It's like, oh my God, that's brilliant. But he phrases it as a question, right? And so it's
yeah.
very non-threatening. It's not like stupid. Why haven't you thought of this brilliant thing that only I can think of? He just asks
Mm,
questions. So I wouldn't, what are they? Don't negotiate against yourself, right? Don't dig yourself into a hole of being one thing.
mm.
Make suggestions, ask questions about different things. Don't be afraid to look stupid either. Learning about things like that, like this, because the best teachers are going to be probably the people at your clients if you have different clients. So ask them stupid questions about how do you buy media? What makes a good media buyer? What do you look for? How do you know what's a good buy?
Yeah.
What makes a good offer? What have you found in the past made a good offer? What are some offers you've tried that were unsuccessful? What do you think the best characteristics of a good offer are?
That's interesting because this last week I've been working with a new client in the B2B software space. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought I had a few ideas about how this business should sell the product. I had some initial impressions or initial ideas because it does kind of relate to the industry, direct response and internet marketing. So I
Mm-hmm.
thought I had some good ideas, but I didn't fully know. So I thought, all right, well, let me go interview some people. So far I've interviewed five sales directors out of 10, the 10 people I plan to interview first. And I just asked them questions, and
Mm-hmm.
I got more insights on how to write the copy from those 5 interviews than any of the templates or any of the formulas or any sort of tactic or any AI, anything that I would say. And I just got so much value from those 5 interviews. Asking those questions, I think you get so many things that you wouldn't get if you just present information to somebody. So I'm thinking about what you're saying. Like if you ask a client something, if you just tell them, there's so much information you're missing out on. Whereas if you ask them, they could take it a completely different direction that you weren't expecting. Just like these people in the interview, I learned so much from them I never expected I would learn. And it actually surprises me how few copywriters go to the level of actually just interviewing people. There's very few copywriters that actually will go ahead and
Mm-hmm.
interview somebody. And what are your thoughts on going deeper with asking questions, not just to the client, but also just to the marketplace?
Yeah, I think questions to the marketplace. I think you're definitely right. It's hard to get better at writing, right?
Hmm.
You can do it. You can improve your craftsmanship in terms of writing. I'm not sure it's even necessary to be a really good writer in order to write copy. But it's really easy to know more than other people about the product, about the market, about the science behind the product. Um, and you're right about interviewing, right? Interviewing salespeople is great because salespeople have test copy all day long. All day long, they test. If I say this, does it work better than if I say this? Oh, it does. Now I'm going to say this from now on. So good salespeople, after a couple of years, it's tested copy. Why would you not kind of use that as a basis? And I think the other thing that I find in really good copywriters is they understand the science behind what it is that they're advertising, right? When I did laundry detergent for Procter & Gamble. I delved into the science of laundry detergent. What makes one laundry detergent different or better than another, right? I read the technical stuff from the technical people. Same thing with people when you write for, stocks or options, let's say. Somebody starts writing for options, they go get a book on options trading and learn what it is. They don't just kind of use the same kind of marketing pablum that they see people using when they talk about options. Like, oh, you'll be able to leverage, your investments enables you to get 10 to 1 on your, whatever it is, right?
Mm,
They
yeah.
don't just, a lot of copy is just, and that's the thing about AI too. It's AI by definition is kind of an echo of everything that's gone before. So now people have an automated way to create things that are an echo of what's gone before. And the thing about AI is it's really good at creating an echo of what's gone before. Like you read it and you go, oh yeah, that's right. That's what the copy should sound like. Let me just cut that and paste it in. But then if you really stopped and read it, if you really trained yourself to have a certain level of discernment with these things, you would see that it's dry. You would see that it's lifeless. You would see that it explains more than needs to be explained, right? It does it well. It explains it well, but it doesn't need to be explained in that detail. It's just going to bog the reader down. It needs to have some life and some punch and even some humanness, right? There's no person in here in this copy. So I don't know how I got kind of off on that tangent,
No,
but
but that's interesting. Yeah.
yeah, the
I
more
was
you
about to
know,
ask you. Yeah.
the
Go
more
ahead.
you know, the more you're able to do that. The more you understand the market, the more you can write with, from your heart to their heart to that market. And it doesn't just sound like, average AI copy. Because if everybody uses AI copy, what's going to differentiate everybody, right? What's going to differentiate is, a real human good copywriter that can add to that can say, oh no, that doesn't work. This works. This piece of this works. This works if I add a little bit to it and take out some of this. So it's like we're all creative directors now in a certain way, which requires in a way even more copy skill than just grinding out copy. Because you not only have to kind of do the right things, you have to know what you're doing. You have to know what works and what doesn't. It's not just writing, right? Now it's like evaluating. Now it's judging. Now it's fixing.
You really have to know the market. That's definitely.
And you really have to, yeah, and why wouldn't you do that? It always amazes me that people write copy and don't know what the market is really like. Not just like, oh, they're 35 to 40 and they are male, predominantly male, and all those demographic things, but really what keeps them up at night? And when they do go to sleep, what do they dream about? Right? Stan Kennedy would say, what do they talk to their wife about over pie, at 3:00 in the morning?
Hmm.
It's those conversations that you want to get to somehow, either by talking to the people involved or by talking to people that talk to them, right? Which again comes down to the client, people at the client.
I think I was very fortunate in the beginning of my career because all the clients I worked with, they were all actually clients selling a product that I would be the buyer of. So I was really just projecting myself a lot of the time. And it really made it a lot easier for me because, one of the first clients I worked with was a language learning education business. And before I got into copywriting, that was my hobby. That was my life. I was learning languages every single minute I wasn't working. I was just studying
Yeah.
Spanish
Oh.
or French or whatever, So yeah, I really enjoyed it. And so when I was actually using this particular language business's product for a good 3 to 4 years. So when I reached out to them, I actually had a lot of, nice things to say about them because that actually made my life a lot better. But when I was writing the emails for them, I didn't have any formal training on emails. I didn't actually even have a course on emails. I would look in my inbox at some businesses that I thought did pretty good email marketing. I
Mm-hmm.
took those as the, like let's say the how it should look. And then I
Right.
took my own perspective of, what I think the market cares about based on myself, because I'm the market that's probably been in the product longer than anybody else. And they're still running today. That same initial 10 emails, they're still running it 6, 7 years later. So, I
Wow.
think it really goes to show that, yeah, like you said, right, you really need to just know the market. I think that's the 80/20 of a lot of this stuff. And it's sometimes when I struggle with critique, I struggle to critique some copy with some of my private clients because, I coach some copywriters. And when I critique certain work, I say, I can give you feedback on the words. I can tell you that this part looks good and this part looks good, but I don't really know this market too well. So I think that to get further than this, you have to answer these few questions, and I'll ask them a few questions about their marketplace. And if they don't know the answer to those questions, like, okay, so why are you submitting for critique? Because you don't know these simple questions about your market, like instantly. That's probably the 80/20 gap. And
Yes.
that goes back to what you were saying, because you were saying that there's only so much you can do to improve the writing of the craft. But I'd love to know, like, what is that next step then? Like, what beyond the writing of the craft, beyond learning about the marketplace? You talked about being able to evaluate, about to be able to judge, improve at that general marketing ability. Like, how do you go about taking the craft to that next level?
A lot of what I help people do is to study things sometimes that aren't even copywriting related, and that's things like psychology. I don't know how people can write or try to be a copywriter without having read books like, um, Eric Hoffer's book. I forget what the name of that is. The I can't remember it now. Um, but there are certain, really seminal book Influence by Cialdini to understand his influence principles. Um, to understand about story, right? Really understand the structure of story. Because if you're going to evaluate something, right, and you can go and you look at it and you go, uh, how do I evaluate this story, right? If you know about story arc, if you know about the hero's journey, if you know about how a 3-act structure and what elements make for a good story, right? Suspense, something at stake, right? It's an arc to it. You're in a much better position now to create stories, to evaluate stories, to know why a story you might get from ChatGPT even doesn't ring true, and what you can do to make it, ring true, or how to take the client's story, right? How do you turn that into something that's not just a kind of linear, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, and now we have this wonderful product. But it's,
Lots of chronologies. Yeah. Lots
yeah,
of
but it's
chronologies
like
and not stories. Mm.
it's instead it's like a movie, right? Like, oh, I was here and oh, I went down and I struggled and I wanted to formulate it and I struggled with formulating it and I kind of got it almost to where I wanted it, but couldn't quite get it. But then I, met someone or found something. Um, and now I'm bringing it to the world. And I'm not saying like make stuff like that up, but a lot of times if you really talk to someone, their story is kind of like that. They did go through a lot. They did make something, create something because of a real challenge. They are trying to bring something to the world. So study story, study screenwriting, right? What we do is
Hmm.
basically has a lot in common with screenwriters, because screenwriters, it's like screenwriters know about putting pictures into people's heads, right? They don't explain things, they show things, right? And in the same way, we need to show things. They know how to create suspense, right? They know how to get you back after the commercial or keep you on, keep you interested.
Hmm.
Um, there's so much to be learned from that. There's so much to be learned from just the mathematics of copywriting. From a purely mathematical sense, to be able to look at copy and go, okay, there are too many words per sentence, right? I know that, good copy has, let's say a maximum of 17 words per sentence or whatever it is, right? This has got like, 25 words per sentence and there's no variety in the sentences, right? It's a 17-word sentence. It's a 17-word sentence. It's a 18-word sentence. It's a 25-word sentence, right?
Yeah,
So
it's just a long
it's a
paragraph.
mathematical way of
Hmm.
knowing what some people also know intuitively, but you're able to explain it now. And you can explain to chat, or you could explain to a junior copywriter and say, look, I need more, they can't be like 18, 20, 17, right? Put in punchy little sentences in the beginning. Go look at how this person writes. Look at the way he varies, his sentence structure. So just from a mathematical sense, from a musical sense, right? How does copy like music? How does it have recurring structures? Just like music has, this section and another section and another section, which is a reprise of the first section. How does copy do that same thing? Copy has very similar structures, very similar variations, very similar. The reason we like certain copy is a lot like the reason we like certain music, because you hear a theme and then that theme is developed and it's like, oh, there's that theme again, right? Right? It's like it gives you a certain pleasure. And then it comes back at the end and you go, ah, there it
Yeah.
is again. And it's the same thing in copy, right? You come back to some things from the beginning. The reader kind of goes, ah, there it is again. That feels good.
Hmm. I like that. Yeah. I like that because when I write story copy, I find that there's an opportunity to do that. You might start with the drama of the story, like here's the big
Mm-hmm.
moment, and then afterwards I'll pull them back and give them a bit of context and then build up, and then it comes back to that first sentence that I said at the beginning. It's like, now we're back in the drama again. So there's this opportunity to create this sort of this sort of rhythm almost.
Yeah.
And yeah, I like that a lot. I think maybe this is again why earlier in my career, a lot of the things I previously did, I have a piano over there, so I like to play music a lot as well. So yeah, music and languages. I think being able to practice different languages and communicate. I think these things definitely help me to learn the craft, because all the things that you're saying now, I didn't learn these things in textbooks necessarily on how to write copy, and I didn't go through many of the original copywriting textbooks in the beginning, but I somehow managed to figure out the stuff that was necessary at that time. And so that's cool. I like that.
A lot of that, I think, is pattern recognition and duplication. The ability
Mm.
to recognize a pattern and to repeat that pattern and to even duplicate it or vary it, right? It's like with music. You see a pattern, you get good at music because you recognize a pattern. Oh, it's a scale. Up and down, up and down. Or it's like, boom, boom, boom. It jumps around a little bit. Or here's a theme and it repeats. And in the same way, with copy, you recognize certain patterns. Oh, this is the begin with a nightmare story, and then comes the this, or this is it's not your problem. This is the real problem. And here's the solution to that real problem. And here's now an even better solution to that real problem that takes less time and effort. It's our product, right? I recognize this pattern, right? And I think some people are just naturally good at that, right? Like Joe Schriefer over at Agora, looks at copy and he goes, oh, that's that's this pattern with a little bit of a variation and a little bit of this other pattern, right? He
Interesting. Mm.
really can recognize these things. And I think if you start learning to do that, it can be a tremendous help because you become more sensitive. You have more arrows in your quiver. You have more ammunition for what you can do. Like, oh, maybe I need to use a little of this pattern. And of course, patterns are
Mm.
even in sentences. Sentences have certain patterns that you can recognize, and you can better instruct AI even to say, look, you're using too much of this pattern. Stop giving me three things. Everything is three things with you. Stop it, or whatever
Yeah.
it is,
Mm.
right? That's why we can recognize AI copy, because it's got certain patterns like that. And I think people like you and I can recognize it. And if someone can't recognize it, they're at very great peril, because they're just going to be utilizing things they shouldn't be utilizing right off the, copy and pasting.
Yeah, this is a good point. This pattern recognition seems to play into every single part of life, actually. Because I was recently talking to a friend of mine who's a successful copywriter. He makes very good money from copywriting, but he doesn't want to become a an influencer or a guru, and he doesn't quite know what business he wants to start yet. So he's decided to take it upon himself to learn day trading. So he's now learning how to do day trading. He's been doing it for 3 years now. And he just
Right.
said to me the other day, I was like, oh yeah, tell me about like what you've been doing in day trading. That's interesting. He says, yeah, it's just about accumulating as much experience and pattern recognition as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about it, it's like, yes, this seems to be the case with many things. To get really good at it, it's just pattern recognition in certain endeavors. So if you want to get really good at copy, then you need to have a lot of exposure to copy that's really good copy. But this is actually a really big challenge, I think, for many new copywriters today, because a lot of the copy I see these days, I mean, let's take business opportunity copy as an example. There isn't much in my inbox that actually stands out to me. I don't find much of the copy I'm reading in my inbox that interesting. Back in 2018, my inbox was very interesting, and I always found that there was these fresh angles, and maybe it was because I was newer, but today I read my inbox, everything feels very mediocre. I find so much copy these days is the quality's dropped significantly from the inbox I used to have. And so I think for newer copywriters, that's difficult then, right? Because you're getting exposure to average mediocre copy, and that's in the inbox from successful businesses. That's now the standard, that these businesses are some of the best in the industry. That's what they're producing because they're relying on their personal brand, or they're relying on their product, or they're relying on some way to buy attention on social. How do you get exposure to good copy? And what do you think? Do you think that copy, there's two questions. Do you think copy today has gone down in quality as well?
Yeah, I think for sure. AI is almost feeding off itself in a certain way. And as more and
Mm.
more people use it, and they don't have the discrimination, they don't have the discernment to use it properly, that produces a lot of copy, which AI then reads and uses as the basis for producing more copy.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, you've got two things really. One is go back in time and figure and see what worked during, you know, I wouldn't say the golden age of copy, but see what, look at great copy. What can you learn from that you can take to today? Because some of it, you can't do. They laughed when I sat down at the piano, but when I started to play, dot, 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 right? But you can look at that and go, that's interesting. It's like a resurrection story. It's that idea of being laughed at, being scorned, but then kind of getting revenge, right? How can I use that in a modern way, right? They laughed at, nobody believed I could do this, right? How do you show someone defying expectations? You know, um, how do you look at the Ogilvy headline? 60 miles an hour, the loudest noise in this new Rolls Royce comes from the electric crock. How do you translate that into something that may get attention now, right? How do you take something that's kind of a negative and turn it into a positive like that? How do you dramatize a benefit like that by comparing it to something that, that makes that benefit stand out, right? The ticking of the clock made the benefit stand out. So for your software company, how do we point to something that makes the benefit of our software stand out, right? When you use our software, the hardest thing you'll have to do is boot up your computer. I don't know, or whatever, right?
Right,
The
right.
hardest thing
Oh
you'll do is
yeah, I see that.
put in the GP7 code or whatever it is, right? And I'm not saying that's a great headline, of course, but I am saying that I wish people would think more in this way, of, I wonder what if this, how could I use this old headline? What's the concept behind it? What can I take from this and use it?
It's a lot to do with what I learned from you a long time ago. You speak about copy thinking versus copywriting,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's a lot to do with taking the substance behind something, taking the idea behind it, and using it in a different way.
Yeah, very much so. I think, and it's something I have to remind myself all the time to do because I just want to sit down and write and get it out, get it over. But I really have to remind myself, just sit down and think. Just think for a while. Think what it's like to be this poor person that, has these problems that this product can solve. What's their day like? How do they wake up? What do they do? How would their day be different with this product? What are they frustrated with? And also that's one aspect of it, right? But the other aspect of thinking is, of course, what we were just doing. How can I take this from, this headline and make it relevant to my product? How can I learn from it? And just, what I kind of teach people to do in the Idea Power course, I just run it through different, things of a sort of a taxonomy. What if I did the opposite, right? What if I just took what we're doing now? What if I said, instead of get rich, how to become poor? Okay, that would make people have to read the headline. And
Yeah.
then you say, well, here's how you become poor. You do these stupid things. Don't do those stupid things and buy this course and do these smart things and you'll get rich.
Yeah,
You
that's pretty
know,
good. Yeah. Hmm.
it's not hard to kind of, you could almost, it's almost like get the attention first and then justify what you did to get that attention is a very good, sometimes, not say always, but, sometimes that's a good, a good way to do it. A
Makes
good
sense. Yeah.
good thing to try. Try more stuff. There's a definite statistical correlation between people who are super creative and people who just try more stuff. I don't think they try more stuff because they're super creative. I think to some extent they're super creative because they try more stuff. And so they
Mm.
have more successes than you, but they also have more failures than you. It's kind of like, well, hey, if you want to be like a great baseball, if you want to hit a lot of, get a lot of hits in baseball, we'll just have more at bats. It's
Right.
pretty, even the worst player could be a great player if they get more at bats, right? Could accumulate more hits than a great player.
We were actually just talking about this before we went live, right? You were telling me that there's an opportunity these days to improve a lot at writing by testing more, doing more testing, more up, like working on different sections of the copy, right?
Different elements. Test this headline. Test it again. Test this headline in combination with this picture.
Mm.
What if we took out this chart? Maybe no one's reading this chart. Maybe people look at this chart and they go, oh, it's complicated. I'm not going to read this anymore. So you test taking the chart out. See what happens. Oh, conversion goes up. Okay. Maybe we shouldn't have the chart in there. Instead, people spend all this time debating whether the chart should be there or not.
Mm.
When the resources now exist to test that sort of thing very rapidly. Back in the day, you used to have to print the whole magalog again to test something like that, right?
Right.
Now there's software that we work with that, can just rapidly take that, do two versions without, report back. Hey, here's what happens. 10% lift, 5% lift or whatever.
So is it just making, let's say, an educated guess or assumption that this might actually be something that could be removed, and then you test it, or is there, do you have, do you have like a process or framework that you go through by thinking about like which pieces you should be testing?
Well, there is kind of a, priorities of what to test, right? On a sales page, let's say, right? You want to test above the fold. You want to test the headline. You want to test the picture. You want to test what picture works best with what headline, because sometimes a combination. You want to test, okay, what comes after that? Is there a proof element, right? Oh, there's no proof element. Let's test putting in a proof element. Bullets, either bullets or icons. A lot of times you'll see kind of on a sales page. And then, does it open with it? How does it open with? Like, what's the general gist of, let's say, the headline? Like, when you talk about pattern recognition, right? When there are like 5 different things that work for headlines, if you want to just really boil it down to its basics, right? I probably can't even remember all 5, but it's like, is it a greed headline? Oh, you get this, you get all these wonderful things, right? It'll do this, cure this. Or is it like a fear headline? The makeup you're using is killing you, right? There's poisons in your makeup or whatever it is, right? Why you're losing money in the stock market. So there's that. Then there's like some enemy of some sort, what the government doesn't want you to know, that kind of category of things. And then there's kind of take one little thing out and highlight it, right? One little, the mechanism or something, right? How to turn off your paint switch or something like that, where it's kind of a mechanistic sort of a headline. So if you know there's like these 5 things that work, or these 5 things that tend to work for what we do, which is even better, because the things that work for your unique company may be different. So you've got those 5 things. So anytime you do like a new sales page, you automatically test those 5 things. You automatically test the headline based on those 5 things.
That's good, yeah. And it's the
And then
same idea behind it, right? Once you just testing different ways to present that idea. Yeah.
Then you test, do you start with a story? Do you start with a startling fact? Do you start with, just test different openings, test different, what do you call it? Call to action. It's funny how big an impact that could have. Not so much the color, which everybody kind of gets hung up on, like this yellow convert better than green. But, what does it say? Does it say order now, which, I'm going to order and I'm committing? Or does it say, ready to change your life? A lot of times that's like, oh yeah, I want to change my life, or find out more, something gentle. Different things work for different ads, right? Different things work for different products. Different things work for different copy. There is no kind of, it always works to do this, right? Sometimes it works to say order now. It's like, yeah, they're ready. They want where's that button? I'm going to hit it.
That's interesting, because a lot of copywriters, they will go into the theory of how they should write the sales letter. And I think that they avoid making certain, they avoid certain titles, because I'm already thinking in my head now, to ask you this, when you said those 5, I'm thinking, each of those different angles sounds like a different awareness level a lot of the time as well. Like if you do a big secret lead versus if you do a promise lead. But I often see in the market today that the headline is it just seems to be, they sometimes just use any angle of those. Like the awareness levels are no longer as much taken into consideration, which is actually quite interesting, because I always was taught that if you're talking to people at this level, then you should use this type of headline and you should use this type of lead. And that makes sense. But then you look at Hormozi's recent event, and Hormozi he went straight into his offer at the very, very beginning. He started talking about his book, which is, if you were to use like the pyramid of awareness levels, it was pretty high up on awareness level. So I thought, well, that's interesting that he's going to use that if he wants to try and target as many people as possible. So I feel like a lot of these things, maybe it is just testing these days. What do you think of how people are applying the theory of marketing to copywriting, and is there a downside to that sometimes?
Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of the Hormozi thing, again, every situation is kaleidoscopically unique. Kaleidoscopically unique in terms of the product, in terms of the time, right? In terms of the awareness, it's hard to correlate Hormozi with anything else, because he has such tremendous awareness, right? He could almost say, hey, here's my book, buy it. And, he's going to sell a bazillion copies. It almost doesn't matter. So, I mean, that's why, one of the things when you're testing is not just test those 5 different ways of doing it. One of which, by the way, that I left out is probably story, right? Just starting with a story, how Susie cured her arthritis with gin-soaked raisins or something like that. But also different awareness levels. One of the successful promotions I've seen for a supplement a friend of mine did, Paris Lampropoulos. And it was something like, why nitric acid doesn't work for high blood pressure, or something like that, right? And I looked at it and I went, that seems awfully far on the awareness level. I'm not sure, because people's awareness is always less than you think it is. You think, oh, everybody knows about this, and it turns out they don't, right? And I'm like, yeah, nobody knows about nitric oxide. I mean, they know about blood pressure drugs. They may have heard of red yeast, but nitric oxide, that's kind of technical. I don't think that's going to work. And it worked like crazy, right? So sometimes you just got to test. And I say this all the time. Sometimes you got to test things that you don't think will work, right? Maybe Paris thought it would work, and more power to him. But, I sometimes when I don't think things will work, I'll go, great, let's test it. Because when you don't think something's going to work, if it does work, it usually works out of the park.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, because you're not because clearly, if you don't think it's going to work, then you're probably the same as a lot of other people in the same market. They also don't think it's going to work. Therefore,
Exactly.
then no
And
one's going to be trying that thing. It's like a new, yeah,
yep. And there's probably something about it which is a little bit maybe scary, offensive, or seems wrong. And it's based on certain assumptions about the market that may be incorrect. Like when I test, I like to test assumptions. What assumptions are we making about this market that we could test? Okay, we're assuming that these people want to get rich. Perfectly valid assumption, right? Let's test that they don't want to get rich so much as they want to prove all the people that said they would never amount to anything, that they want to prove them wrong. So instead of focusing on how much money they'll make, let's focus on how good it's going to feel to drive up in a Rolls Royce and show your sixth grade teacher that said you would never amount to anything that you've succeeded. You know what I mean? It's just like, okay, how can we test these assumptions we're making? Because assumptions are big breaks on your ability to be successful, for a company to be successful, right? When you assume things about the market that may not be true. And it's easy to do that because people are very complicated. They don't do things for the reasons we think they do things. They've got a lot of secret stuff going on. And that's why that deep understanding of people is so important, to really understand, you know what? People don't care about money in a certain way. It's just pieces of paper. It's just numbers on a spreadsheet. So what? You've got this amount, this amount, this amount. But they really care about how they feel about themselves and how they look to others. You know? And we've got to take that into account when we write to them. Just like when we write to people about arthritis, we've got to take into account that the pain almost isn't even the worst part of it. The worst part is the debilitatingness. The worst part is the not being able to play with your grandchildren. The worst part is the fear of we're going to wind up in a nursing home because you can't, reach to get something off of shelves, right? Or you might fall down and you can't get up because you don't, it hurts too much to lift yourself up. And to be able to do that, by the way, not in like a heavy-handed AI way, right? Like, I know that you don't want to end up in a nursing home, and you want to play with your grandchildren, but to be more subtle and like you would talk to a friend, because that's ultimately the best copy. Is what would I say to a friend, right? I wouldn't say, look, I'm just like you. It's not your fault that you're like this. And I want to show you a killer new way to cure your arthritis. And I'd say, look, I know you've tried a lot of stuff, right? I know you're tired of not just the pain. I know you're tired of, not being able to do the things you used to be able to do, right? Feeling, less. And I know probably like me, you're a little scared of maybe one day winding up in an assisted living, place as this, because things like this don't tend to get better. But look, I found this thing and it works in a different way, right? It works by, rebuilding your joints or whatever it is, right? That's where the mechanism now comes in. Because now you have to explain to your friend, okay, what do you have that's different?
It's really good.
But you wouldn't say to your friend, let me tell you about arthritis and how it starts, and go into a whole.
It's not about the pain. It's about this.
Right.
It's about going to nursing, because AI will do that, right? One of AI's great patterns is it's not this, it's that.
Right.
But it does it all the way through. So I was reading a piece of copy 2 weeks ago from a newer copywriter. I think 7 occasions in one email of 500 words. It's not this, it's that. And it's not this, it's that. It's not this, it's that. So it's not this, it's that. I just thought to myself, I don't really know what you said in the whole email. You just had words because there's all this missing stuff. So yeah, that makes sense. That does make sense. I think a lot of the time, in my experience from working with copywriters these days, a lot of them don't believe that that they know enough to take the lead on the project. Yeah. Because I think it's like that maybe that's maybe why the copy is sometimes mediocre, because sometimes the client says, hey, here's the system. I think it's also because certain businesses, their ad costs are so high that they're scared of testing stuff. They're scared of messing up. So it's like, this is our system. Here's what we like. Here's what we approve. Here's what we don't like. And then it just, you've got the ceiling where you can't really enable them to have any creativity because they're not allowed to. I was reviewing some copy with a copywriter that I've been working with privately, and he's been telling me he's worried that his skill is not so good and he's not a good writer. And he's been writing for the same business for 3 years. And I looked at the process that he goes through, and there's almost there's zero freedom in the process. It's completely mechanical. I almost don't know why they have a copywriter in the position, because there's no copy, there's no writing. It's just, let's follow the template. These assistants found this idea that is potentially interesting. You have to use the ideas that the VA has found, and you have to put it in this formula, and then you have to add this image. And so I say, well, bro, you're working with the wrong client to be able to fully test your abilities as a writer. I don't think this has anything to do with you, and I think it has a lot more to do with the process that they're putting you through. But yeah, I think that's part of why I've seen a lot of copy that's not as good these days. It's just less creative freedom.
Yeah. And sometimes you have to get that for yourself. Like I'm a big advocate of not niching, of really exploring, because I've learned so much. I've learned from working with nonprofits, right? And fundraising. How do you sell something that there is nothing to sell, except you get a good feeling if you give us money? Like what a wonderful experience that is, to learn about that and to practice writing that kind of copy. And selling very consumer oriented things and selling very industrial product, kinds of thing, little piece of something that goes into machinery or something, and you're selling it to engineers who are concerned about the specs on it. How do you sell laundry detergent, right? Learned so much working with, big brands, selling stuff to consumers like that. How do they think about that? How do they think about clean? What an interesting thing to explore. And of course, you as Jay Abraham, articulates so well, you take things that work in one market industry and you use them in another industry where they're kind of unheard of.
I took a lot of the BizOp stuff into that language offer, by the way.
Yeah,
A lot
oh
of the stuff
yeah,
I
like
was
that.
I
Yeah,
was I was reading a lot of like how to make money online,
right.
and then I thought like, oh, how to learn languages online, basic example, but like, then there'd be these stories of this guy struggling, this BizOp coach, and I took the struggling from the BizOp coach and I took the similar ideas and certain principles and I said, okay, let's use it for this language learning guy. It worked really well. What is it like to sell for nonprofit? I'm so curious. Like, how do you even go about? Yeah, how do you go about that?
Well, again, it's pattern recognition. You look at past stuff and you see, okay, what are the patterns? What do they do? How do they, you know, and there's just certain basic principles, right? Like people care more about one little girl than they do about a million people starving, right? So you make it personal about the one person. And, how do you make people feel good about giving money, right? That they'll be happy to give it because they'll feel like that money's going to a good purpose. If it's political fundraising, of course, how do you aggravate people a little bit into giving money as a kind of way to, get back at what they want to get back at? Um, but when it's more was for research, right? American Arthritis Institute or something like that. I did some work for Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare, which was more advocacy. And that was a little more, kind of scary, like, they're going to take away Social Security and Medicare from us. But people don't like things being taken away. And that's why what we were talking about before, when we were talking about arthritis, it's not so much that they want to get rid of the pain as they don't want their freedom taken away. They don't want their choices taken away. They don't want their options taken away. Their option to go play golf, their option to play with their grandkids, right? Their option to have an active life, their option to not live in a nursing home. And so there's a good lesson in that. In you're always, what is that psychological thing that people care more about? Like if you say to someone, "Oh, here's something you can do and you could make $100," people are like mildly interested. If you say, "Look, I'm going to take away $100 from you unless you do this thing," it's like, "Oh, you'll do that thing." No one
Right.
wants to have
Yeah.
something taken, and yet it's the same, right?
That's the
It's the
same,
same
right?
$100, gain in a certain way, whether you have it given to you or not taken away. But people don't. Somebody once did the analogy of if somebody says, "Hey, there's a sale on tires," um, at this store, at 3 a.m, there's a sale on tires. You should go down there right now. You'd be like, no, you roll over and go to sleep. But if somebody says, "Hey, these kids are stealing the tires off your car," you run like hell downstairs
Hmm.
because one
That's a good point. Yeah.
is potential gain, the other
Yeah.
is averting loss. So yeah, that's the psychological principle people don't want. So how do you frame it as averting loss, right? If you're trying to raise money for cancer research, how do you phrase that as, a lost opportunity to save people from, from getting cancer, from being cured of cancer, maybe even yourself, why would you not give to this research? And of course, there's always a little bit of guilt in, doing your part. You've got money, you're successful, or we wouldn't be sending you this mailing. Let us,
That's good.
we
Yeah.
know you want to do good, right? That's kind of Cialdini. People want to be consistent. We know you want to do good. Here's an opportunity for you to do good, right? We don't take a big chunk of money of donations like a lot of charities do. We use it for real research. We're doing you a favor here.
It's a good favor. Yeah. Come
It's
in.
like a favor.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. We're helping you. Yeah. We're helping you. You're just,
We're
you're
helping
just
you.
saying thank you with a couple of dollars. Yeah.
I mean, in a way, it's a good deal. Like to be able to feel good about something for $10 or $100 or whatever it is. That's a pretty good trade. But you got to really
Yeah, I
know,
think
like
so.
you were saying about how you do that. Like you got to really know. Okay, this is the psychology. This is why people give money to charities. Just like when I worked with lotteries for the first time, I was like, oh, people spend money on lotteries because they think they're going to win. And it's funny. The reality was, no, they don't think they're going to win. They're not stupid, right? It's not true that poor
Right.
people
Oh,
are bad with
interesting.
math. They can figure out what the odds are, but they will pay for the opportunity for however long between when they buy the ticket and the drawing that there is a possibility of them becoming unimaginably wealthy.
That's deep. How do you figure that out? How did you find that?
Oh, they
That's
pretty much
interesting.
know. And again, you ask the client.
Uh,
They,
okay. You just ask the client a lot of
yeah,
the time.
they say, oh, you know
Yeah.
what real psychology is here? It's,
I like that. Yeah. Because I was going to ask you, because when you were saying this, I mean, literally written for everything at this point, it
pretty
sounds
much.
like. So yeah, how do you go through that beginner phase? Because this is something I struggle with. I have my comfort zones. I have my niches I feel comfortable writing
Right.
in. I have certain experience from life I can draw, for specific industries as well. That makes it easier because I'm often just talking to a younger or older or the same version of myself. But there's some industries where I can have a lot of energy for the first week or two because it's new and fresh, but then it gets a bit hard to actually move through that beginner phase. I remember one of my clients, they were actually in B2B software as well. And
Mm-hmm.
it was a year that I just I pushed myself to get this voice, to be able to speak to these successful business owners that we were selling this thing for, or selling it to back in 2022. It was very hard for me. Like I really struggled to write for this copy. It took me 3 hours a day to write the emails. Just one email took me 3 hours because it was painstaking to write this copy, but I forced myself because I needed the client and I needed to make succeed with the client, and I eventually learned. But I don't know how I would. How do you do that? How do you enter all these industries, and how do you continuously be the beginner for a new market and get through that phase of you don't know what you don't know? Is there certain patterns that you bring across, or what is your process for entering new markets?
I think you just read everything you can. You talk to everyone you can. Talking to people is really helpful. You can read a lot, you can read a book, but to really like talk to someone that makes laundry detergent is like eye-opening. And of course it's interesting because it's his life is making laundry detergent, right? Um, and I mean, what strikes me about what you just said is what a huge thing what you just said is in terms of someone being a successful copywriter. And that is that you knew what you didn't know. I think most people just kind of blissfully go through that and stay at that stage of a very cursory, basic, superficial knowledge. And for some reason, that wasn't enough for you. And you were willing to put in the time and effort, like you said, 3 hours, to do an email or whatever. Whereas I think a lot of people, too many people, I think, would be just like, I'm just going to do it in 15 minutes. I'll have ChatGPT help me, or I'm just not going to spend the time. I'm not going to spend the time on it.
Yeah, there's less pride in some. I think the bizopping, we could call it that,
Right.
of copywriting.
The optimization of copywriting.
Like yeah, like it's become a bit of a bizop where I think many newer writers these days, and they don't really watch this channel, but many of them they wanted to come into this for the easy money. So I think that the fact that this is not so easy, it actually requires a very deep capability in writing, is kind of what pushes them away after a few months of being in the craft. They suddenly realize, yeah, you actually can't just throw this stuff to AI and in 15 minutes have what you want, unless you actually care about the client and you actually care about the product. It might take 3 hours, it might take 4 hours. I would, the first big client I had that I knew would change my career took me a day to write an email. I wrote 5 emails in a week. I didn't care how long it would take. I just was willing to do it because I knew that this was the quality that they expected of me and I would figure it out. It wasn't about the money yet. It was more about getting the results first, I don't remember where I was going with this. I wanted to bring this into something because, I just think that, I think that a lot of the newer writers these days don't appreciate the craft the same way as they used to. And I think that's personally upsets me a lot because I really love writing. Like this conversation, hearing you talk about writing reignites my passion for the work. I want to get back and go write some emails.
That's nice to hear.
I want to go write, a sales letter or something because I love writing. I love it more than I do the technicals of businesses and building, SOPs or whatever. I actually really enjoy the process of just sitting and writing. I don't even use AI too much because using AI to me takes away that part of the process I enjoy. I personally enjoy writing the copy, so I don't even want to give it to AI. What are your thoughts on how to integrate AI these days? Especially since it is a powerful tool and it can help, but there's some writers are finding it. They've even told me that they find it a bit of a drug. Like it's like they're using it, but it's taking away their ability to write because they're too dependent on the AI.
Oh, so much. A couple of things, and it is like a drug, and it's designed to be like a drug, right? You say to AI, "Give me an idea for an essay," right? It gives you an idea for the essay. It says, "Would you like me to outline the essay?" Say, "All right, do an outline. I'm going to write the essay, but you do the outline."
Upsell.
Here's
It's
an
an
outline.
upsell.
Would you like me to write the first paragraph? Oh, okay, write the first paragraph. Here's the first paragraph. Would you like me to write the rest of it? Oh, okay, write the rest of it. So before you know it, it's like done everything for you. One thing I want to say is that don't use AI to write first drafts, right? You do the thinking first. You do, and that might not necessarily be the final thinking. Maybe AI will have better thinking. But if you do the thinking first, then at least you will have that interaction with the material and understand that material and be better able to evaluate what comes out of AI and say, oh, this is better, or no, mine is better. Or you know what? This about what AI did is better, but these parts of what I did is better. So I'm going to put those two things together. Because it's real easy to depend on AI for first drafts. And I used to even advocate that. It's like, yeah, have AI do a rough draft. Like, no, you think it through first, right? No matter how quick, you do a rough draft. You come up with 10 ideas. And then when AI comes up with 10 ideas, you'll be in a lot better position to evaluate those ideas. And you'll have ideas of your own. that have a human element to it. The other thing I want to say about AI too is that, like you were talking about how hard it is to write and how it took you a long time to do the AI is the same thing. You've got to put the time into it. You've got to understand it. You've got to work with it. You've got to, use it every day. If you're going to, if you're going to do it right. Learn how to write, good prompts. Learn how to go back and forth with it. Like so many people just take, do one iteration and it's like, oh, okay, I use it, I don't use it. But no, tell it, oh, it's too long, too short, too corporate. Because AI will always try to find the lazy way out, because it's impossible for ChatGPT. It's doing all this computations for 1 billion people. So it tries to keep it as minimal and simple as it can. Right? So you've got to keep pushing it. You've got to ask for more depth. You've got to say, look, I looked at this and it sounds a little bit like everything else that's written for this. Can you make it more unique? And of course, AI will go, oh, you're so right and you're so brilliant.
Yeah, you're great point. Good point.
Great point. God, no wonder you. And then, it will come up with another draft of it and will usually be better. So I like it for that. I like it for, for editing. A lot of times I'll give it something and it'll make suggestions, and some of them I won't use, but some of them are like, whoa, can't believe I didn't see that. Or, yeah, that really should be worded a little differently. Or, yeah, that was kind of a lazy adjective that I used there. Or, oh, yeah, I forgot to tell people that it's inexpensive or whatever it is. Or, yeah, it's got a good point. That might be a little, a little offensive the way I said that. I did kind of put down people a little bit when I said, you're all idiots or whatever it is that it's telling me. I'd be a little over the top that I might want to reconsider.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So, yeah, I mean, all those cliche things, use it as a tool, use it as a partner, but just remember, it's kind of a really inexperienced intern that doesn't have a lot of that has no human real understanding, but it's really good and really fast at sounding knowledgeable. So just be really careful with it. But don't use it.
I find it's very effective when I use it to write out the flesh out something I've already written.
Yeah. Fleshing out, or even just to say to it, if you got like a rush job for an arthritis supplement, say, like, what are the 10 things that people with arthritis know that people who don't have arthritis don't know? Right? And, one of them, maybe it's really embarrassing to ask for help, right? You can't open a jar, and you don't want to say to someone, like, if I can't open a jar, I'm like, can you open this for me? I'm like, fine, I don't care. But if you've got arthritis and you can't open it because of arthritis, then it becomes a little embarrassing, because it means you're weak now because of arthritis. You're sick, you're infirm, you're, certain things. So to incorporate that understanding into your copy can be pretty powerful, and AI kind of can give you that pretty instantaneously. Or you can tell it to go read 1 million Reddit posts on AI, on arthritis forums. Tell me, what do people talk about? How do they talk about themselves? Do they refer to themselves as arthritis sufferers? Do they refer to themselves as, as someone with arthritis? Is that how they refer to themselves? Because if they don't call themselves arthritis sufferers, you don't want to call them arthritis sufferers, because that could be.
Yeah. Then it doesn't sound like you're part of the.
Yeah. Learning that lingo, right? So you could tell AI, go read all these posts by people with arthritis, and then now tell me whether my copy sounds like someone wrote it that has arthritis. And AI will probably know this doesn't, this doesn't, this doesn't, this doesn't. Here are some suggestions maybe for fixing that. So then you fix it. You give it to it again. Say, now does it? And AI may say, yeah, better, but it's still a couple places here you might want to, consider changing. So
it goes back to those questions again.
Yeah, very powerful.
You're asking it questions, just like you ask clients, just like you ask the market. You're asking AI questions. It's interesting.
and
Hmm.
have it ask you questions. Like, what do you want to ask me that would help you do what I'm asking you to do better?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Right?
that's a good idea.
Be very happy to
Hmm.
do that.
Yeah, it'll give you a lot of questions.
It'll give you, yeah, it'll be like, oh my God, I didn't want 20 questions. Just give me 10, the most important ones. Um, and the other thing is ask AI to help you improve using AI. Like a lot of times I'll get done with going back and forth with it on some copy and it won't have gone well. And I'll say, what could I have done differently in my initial prompt to you that would have avoided all this frustration and back and forth that we've just been through? And it'll say, well, you could have been a little more specific about, that this was going to, left-handed people in Japan. And you could have maybe given me a little more about this. And, this wasn't clear and, blah, blah, blah. And I'll say,
Interesting.
okay, so rewrite my prompt now the way it should have been. And it'll give it to me back. I'll go like, wow, okay. I'm keeping that, that's how I should. It's helping you. It's a great tool for that.
Yeah, I really like that. Just asking more questions. It's such a good takeaway. I'm just thinking all these opportunities, and I don't ask enough questions.
Yeah,
I must
it's
ask more
really,
questions. Yeah, give you so much. It solves a lot of the things that you're trying to figure out. You don't have to figure it out yourself. Sometimes the answers are out there. You just have to ask for them.
that is true. There's that aspect of it, and there's also the aspect of it. It's a very non-threatening way to get information from people or to tell them, suggest to do something differently. Like there's a big difference between, like, I suggest that you go to your competition and get their leads that they can't close, right? And then they may say, well, we tried that, or they may say, oh, that's a stupid idea, or whatever, right? But if you say to them, have you ever tried going to the competition and seeing if you can get, their unfulfilled leads from them, people they can't sell, because your product is much lower price. So if price is an issue, why not buy those leads from them or trade with them, people, And if you ask it as a question, have you ever considered that? It's a very different conversation now that you're having with them. If they've tried it before, they say, oh, we tried that. And say, oh, okay. Now you don't feel stupid for suggesting something they've already tried.
This is also great for interviews with potential clients or like even sales calls, because there's a copywriter I was working with last week. We were on a call. We're doing some role play, and I was saying, okay, I'll be your potential client, and we'll have a nice conversation real quick, and let me listen to how you go about I don't know, closing me or getting me to want to work with you. And he went straight into all the experience that he has and all this stuff and all that stuff. And I said, bro, how about you just ask them before you go any further? Why don't you just ask them, what would success look like? You're looking for a copywriter. What is success going to look like? And what are your goals for the business? And how does the copywriter fit into what you want to do? And what do you already have for the copywriter? Like, what's already in the business? What systems do you guys have? And how do you see me integrating with them? Like, just be curious about their process. Even if they ask you, what's your experience with landing pages? I might say something, well, yeah, I have quite a lot of experience in lots of different industries. Is there something specifically you're looking for? I can tailor my, give you a response that's more relatable to what you're looking for. Like, tell me more, right? So I'm like always looking for more and more information. And I find that that's, I've hired people like that for my own business. The ones that ask me the most questions about my product, the people that ask me the most about my vision. I felt like they genuinely cared about my business instead of just, getting the money. And I think that that's also another powerful aspect of this. So yeah, question-based copywriting.
The other aspect of that too, I think, is what's your biggest frustration, right? What are you frustrated with when it comes to landing pages? Or what are you frustrated with when it comes to copywriters? What's your biggest frustration with working with copywriters? Let them tell you how to
That's a
sell
good question.
Because people are happy to tell you about their frustrations.
Yeah, I like that.
And it's important.
You're hiring a copywriter for the third time this year. What's up with that? I saw your post last month as well. What happened?
I mean, really what we're always selling is answers to frustrations. People are going to try different laundry detergent because they're frustrated with the laundry detergent they're using, not getting their clothes clean. Maybe it doesn't have a nice fragrance. Maybe it doesn't. Who knows? Maybe it's too expensive. Maybe it doesn't come in a little pod. Maybe it's not environmentally friendly. Like, helps to know what they're frustrated with. And if you can relieve someone's frustrations, that's a huge, because there's a lot of stuff up there that's like make things a little bit better, right? Oh, this could be it's a better copywriter. This will be a good copywriter. But if that copywriter can do away with the things I'm frustrated about, or if this laundry detergent can do away with the things I'm frustrated about, that's big. Because people don't like to be frustrated.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. I want to take the conversation a little different direction here. I'd love to know from your personal experience, what was one of the most challenging projects that you've worked on over the years, from whatever angle, whether it was frustrating or difficult or it wasn't as you expected? What was one of those projects that was really challenging for you?
One of the first things I worked with Boardroom on was a book on estate planning, which is, like when you die, how your estate is taxed and who you leave money to and all that stuff. And it was just, they do all these books about, cool ways to cure diseases with stuff in your kitchen cabinets and ways to save money. And they do books on, like fun little consumer secrets, what never to eat on an airplane and stuff like that. And I couldn't believe I got stuck with a book on estate planning. Like, not only was it the most boring subject in the world, it was the most depressing subject in the world, right? Because who wants to think about how to, what's going to happen when you die, right? Nobody even wants to think about that. So it was really an interesting challenge to do that. And one of those things, like doing fundraising, right? It strengthens you to have to figure, okay, if I could sell this, I can sell anything, damn it, right? So it really forced me to go in there and really read the stuff and say, okay, how do I turn this into something interesting, right? Like there was one section I remember, it was all about how to leave money to people, right? It was like, well, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to allocate in terms of, percentages, or you can allocate in terms of dollar amount. And if you do it this way, there are certain tax advantages. If you do it this way, there are certain tax advantages. But, there's one, and there are a couple of things that, that you need to bear in mind. Buried in there was a couple of things you need to bear in mind not to do, because it could cause invalidation of the, behest requests or something like that, right? And I was like, holy shit, you mean that, sorry for cursing, but
I know, that's all good.
I was like, wow. So I realized that this means that there's something that you could do that means that your money's not going to go to the people you want it to go to. So that kind of became a bullet, which was basically how to avoid accidentally disinheriting your heirs.
Yeah, that's much
And
better.
it was kind of like that. I had to go through the whole book and say, okay, how do I make this into something interesting? And one of the other things it taught me was to go outside the book. And in this case, it meant finding examples of people, pretty well-known people who had died, and their heirs inherited inherited their estates, but the heirs couldn't pay the estate taxes. The estate taxes were so high that the heirs had to sell everything off or go into bankruptcy, or it just made like a mess because they hadn't planned adequately. They didn't create trusts. They didn't distribute the money before they died. They didn't do a million things that they should have done. And it destroyed businesses that had to be sold. It bankrupted people. And there were some interesting stories. Like one guy was U.S. Senator, and this happened to his heirs. And it just made for a little interesting sidebar about how this guy died. He left $20 million mistake in the estate. And then it turned out this happened and these awful things. And then kind of, and then I remember the line, and John Carlton kind of helped me a little bit with this line because it's very John Carlton-ish. Said, if this could happen to a U.S. senator,
Oh
imagine
no,
what could happen to you. It's like,
that's a good
oh,
line.
my line was like, don't let this happen to you, right? Get the book. And John changed it to, if this could happen to a U.S. senator, imagine what could happen to you. Yeah. So
The power of a coach, the power of somebody looking at your copy with you,
really,
somebody giving
and,
you that feedback, right?
yeah. And when we were talking about how do you get good, how do you learn, how do you grow, you know, since you and I both do coaching, I didn't want to be too self-serving, but really the best thing you can do is to work with someone that,
Yeah,
that is on a different level than you and can pull you up and push you up and kick you in the ass up. And, because a lot of it is, I've got a little bit of a reputation of being a little brutal when it comes to copy, but a lot of it is stop writing this garbage. You're putting me to sleep. Write something that doesn't put me to sleep. As Gary Halbert said to John Carlton after 15 drafts, on 15 drafts of copy that he threw in the garbage, put some goddamn empathy into this. And then finally, John learned how to put empathy into it. But it takes that. It may not take 15 drafts or, being really harsh, but it does take, no, this isn't it. No, this isn't it. No, this isn't it. Try this, try this, try this, try that. Okay, now you've got it. And then, of course, on the next one, they completely mess it up. So you got to kind of go, no, this isn't it. No, this isn't it. Okay,
no.
now you got it back again. Okay, now you got it. Now you got it. Now, oh, you don't got it again. Okay, now you got it. Now you got it forever. But it takes, being pretty hard on people's copy because they have to learn to be hard on their own copy.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's the thing, right? You have to have that voice. You need to have that internal critique. My copy coach, he highlighted the entire email and just put no. That's it, It's like, it's like, so I'm like, what do I do here? He's like, no, this isn't good. And it's like, oh, well, why? He's like, it's just not good. So you got to sit there and you got to self-diagnose. And as I got better at writing, I had his voice. I still have his voice when I write sometimes, that editing,
right.
there's a second voice. You need that copy coach's voice that you can switch into. That's not assuming that the reader's reading. That's not assuming that this is good. That doesn't like it by default, is like already doesn't like it just because you're the one that wrote it. It's like,
Right,
no, tear this to pieces. Looking for every single exception, like just that person that's not sold from the moment you start writing. And I think having that voice in your head solves so many things when you can get a voice in your head from a good copy coach. And that's definitely improved my writing. And it actually was one of the questions I wanted to ask you. I wanted to ask you about how you can use a copy coach to your advantage as a writer, because obviously, I believe this, and I talk about this a lot on my channel, that if you're going to really want to get anywhere in life, why would you want to spend tens of thousands of hours trying to do something that has been solved thousands of times by thousands of incredible people? Like, you can definitely go on the journey, but why solve stuff from scratch that everybody else has already worked through and developed the skills on, like copywriting, like fitness? Just save yourself a lot of those hours. I have a coach for fitness. I don't want to master fitness all by myself. I'd rather have somebody who's been training for the last 15 years every single week and trains lots of other people. I'd rather he catered my workout routine a little bit more to what he thinks makes sense based on me, versus me having to trial and error it. And also there's that aspect of accountability. So, I've always had a copy coach throughout my career. I've always had somebody coaching me. And even today, like I even some of the really good writers that I've coached, they've got really, really good. They work with some very good businesses, and I'll often ask them for feedback, and I'll often consult them on how I can write better stuff, because they just see stuff I don't see. So I don't even think it always matters. I don't even think it matters whether the person's more experienced or better. Sometimes it's just that second set of eyes, right? So yeah, what are your thoughts on how to leverage, coaching or consulting from another copywriter?
Yeah. I swear when I worked with Dan Rosenthal, he would very much believed in showing the copy all around the office. And I swear, if the cleaning people would show up late at night, he would show them the copy and, ask for their opinion on it, which probably they were closer to the market than we were anyway,
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so many things that a coach does. And there's a reason that, in the minor leagues, they have coaches. When you get to the major leagues in baseball or football, you don't stop having coaches. You have more coaches. right? And Tiger Woods has a coach. The best golf players have coach, because part of it is not being able to see yourself. Part of it's not having the leverage, right, to really be able to change things in yourself in a certain way. And part of that's accountability. Part of that's just, it's different coming from outside you. We've got a certain inherent bias when we look at our own copy. It's like, I want to be done with this. It's good, and the person looking. And part of this also, I think, is it's the voice of the copy coach. It's also the ability to look at your own copy from the outside, to look at it as if you're the prospect, or to look at it as if you didn't write it. Because I think those are two things, right? One is to look at it as if you didn't write it. Because I think a lot of times we know boring copy when we see it, but somehow we don't know our own boring copy when we see it. Part of that's the curse of knowledge. We've been living with it for so long. We don't really see it in a certain way. Part of that is not being able to see that it's not understandable on a certain level because we have the curse of knowledge. We know how this stuff works. We know how arthritis works. We know how whatever it is we're writing about it works. The software works. We don't see that someone that doesn't know that, doesn't have our knowledge, won't be able to understand, parts of this. But I think it's also, we don't tend to see what we need to do to improve. And I think that's where a really good copy coach comes in, right? Some things we see, I got to get better at this. I got to get better at storytelling. But a good copy coach will see the things that you don't see, that you're habitually doing, that you need to stop doing, the things that you're not doing that you need to do, the mindset shifts that you need to make, like not having empathy for the prospect, not seeing from their point of view, over explaining. I think people, when they write copy, they're like, now I'm in the explaining mode and I'm going to explain this, and they're now I'm telling a story, and they go on for 2 pages telling this story that really could have been told in a paragraph or two, because they're in now story mode and they don't see that they need to stop. They don't see a lot of times that just conceptually it needs to be taken to another level. It's not, it needs more, like sometimes people will write headlines that are a good statement of what the ad should be about rather than a good headline, if that makes sense. It's like an explanation of kind of what we want to say rather than the creative, imaginative, fun, attention-getting way that it should be said. Like I once did for a newsletter, I was working with all these headlines about how this newsletter will tell you all these things that'll keep you from getting sick, that will help you when you get sick, the cutting edge stuff, how imaginative it is, how different it is from mainstream medicine, right? This mechanism, that mechanism. And there's so much of that stuff out there for health newsletters. And finally, the headline just came to me, how to cure any disease by taking advantage of its hidden weakness. Because so many of the cures were like, this is how we trick cancer into destroying itself, right? Right? Cancer loves sugar, so we take away the sugar and the cancer starves to death, right? I say, that's its hidden weakness, right? And then the same thing with arthritis. The same thing with this. I kind of made it work. And so a lot of times it's just someone needs to force you to take the copy to the next level, right? So much copy these days is kind of first draft. Like, yeah, okay, you got it down on the page, right? Now it needs to sing. Now it needs to be magical. Now it needs to grab the attention and hold on to the person's attention for dear life, right? Now you need to think about coming up with a clever analogy for this. It's, it's like putting motor oil in your car. Your car needs motor oil. Your joints need lubrication too. That's why this,
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think most copy these days I review, I often say that as well. I say, yeah, this is a great first draft.
This is a great
This is
first.
good. It's great. Yeah, that's nice. I like it. I think it's got a good structure. I think the idea is interesting. Great first draft. Go ahead but I mean, that sounds like a fitness coach too, right? You think you're done, and they say, no, this is just the second set of five. We're going to
Right.
do three more. We're going to do three more sets here. What do you think? You think this is over already? I'm literally telling you from last week. I had to do five sets. I couldn't believe it was five sets. I thought, yeah, three is definitely enough. It's like, no, 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 no. This is a warm up. So I think having a good coach hold you accountable like that is definitely, yeah. Because I often get sick of my own copy too. I'm done with it. I finished the research. I've done
Yeah.
all the work. I've sat there and I finished it, and then the copywriting friend of mine or the coach will say, I really think you buried the lead. I think you could start with the story. And I'm like, oh,
Right.
do I really have to go and remove, change the headline and like get rid of that lead and figure out a way to put the proof in the story and have to move that whole piece up? Yeah, I guess so, because that person's holding me accountable to it. I would just rather push it off and, be done with it. But I think that accountability is what takes the copy to the next level. And so is that part of the work that you do with your clients then in the inner circle? I know that you coach a lot of copywriters and you've written books as well, right? So I mean, you do a lot of coaching.
I do a lot of coaching, both the inner circle, which is kind of the group coaching, as well as coaching people on an individual level. Um, I think another part of what we've just been talking about too, a lot of what I do is just to show people how to do things that you and I kind of take for granted. Like, it's one thing to say to someone, this is boring, but a good coach will be able to say, here's 5 ways you could make it not boring, right? You could
Yeah.
tell a story. You could put in some startling facts. You could use more imaginative, colorful language. You could get angry. It's always more interesting when you get angry, and someone's ranting about something. You could personify it, right? Instead of, well, here's how the immune system works. First, the triagulites are secreted in order to attack the viruses and bacteria to neutralize them and to prevent you from getting sick, right? Or you could make it like, okay, here's how the immune system works. Well, first of all, your T cells are like this little army that gets created, and they go marching out to attack the viruses, but they can't get into the viruses because the viruses have this protective shell that they have to get through. So they kind of create this little Trojan horse that kind of slips in through and so
Yeah,
now it's like
much more
interesting,
interesting.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what I think a good, and then after you explain that to a good beginning copywriter, now they have that to use forever. And that's how people get better. Not
I think
reading a
that's
book
it.
about theory or.
That's true to the difference between like copy chiefing, right? And copy coaching, I think is
Yeah.
is that I will often read copy and I'll often say, I can tell you why this is weak. I can tell you why this lacks the what it needs. You need more clarity. You need to do this. You need to do this. And here's the things you need to go to do to work on it. A lot of copywriters will say to me, "What would you say here?" And sometimes I'll entertain that and I'll like write that piece of copy and give them that
Right.
copy out loud. But sometimes I'll say, no, I think that in this case, you actually need to improve on the skill that you need to write this section, because if you can solve this problem without somebody solving it for you, then you're not going to submit the same problem next week for review. Because I think that's fundamentally a lot of the time the issue with a lot of copy, let's say chiefing or copy critique, is it is useful, but it's only contextually useful. Whereas if you actually say, hey, you're generally writing weak closes, you're generally writing weak CTAs. Here are 5 ways that you can write a better CTA. Here's material on it. Go and work on that. Then you don't have that problem. You don't have to keep showing up with that same problem. So that's also something that you do then with your clients, is that you show them how to improve so that they continually have more and more tools that they can use to write better copy.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I do with people in the group coaching or the individual coaching. With a lot of clients, what I do more and more is kind of copy fixing. I find the highest and best use of my time is to take something that's not working or sort of working and, revise certain parts of it, make it work, whether that's a new lead. Maybe the leads got tired, or maybe the lead was never very good in the headline, or maybe the opening of the VSL or whatever it is.
Oh yeah,
I think
yeah.
that,
I did actually mean the coaching, the
yeah,
student coaching. Yeah, right. Okay.
yeah, but the
Oh,
student
that's
coaching, for
interesting.
sure.
Yeah.
I like,
Hmm.
it's funny when you said here are 5 things you can do. The number 5 is great, isn't it? It's kind of like a nice, manageable amount of things. And I think people could do worse than to always try to have 5 patterns, 5 ways of doing things. What are 5 ways to do a headline? What are 5 ways to do a lead? Right? You could open with a story. You could open with it. You could open with starting fact. You could open with very empathetic. You could, what are your 5 ways, right? What are your 5 ways to do a call to action? Well, you could do a really hard order now. You could do a more gentle, improve your life now. Tomorrow awaits you. Um, what are 5 ways, 5 kinds of proof that you always want to use? I think proof is just, I don't want to get off on another tangent, but proof is hugely underutilized. So if you
Big
really
time.
know what are the
Yeah.
5 kinds of proof, right? The statistical proof, right? There's kind of analog proof, analogy proof. This is like this, therefore, it's proven and good. There's social proof. Make sure you got some social proof in there. There's common sense proof, right? Doesn't it make sense that you take care of your car, right? You change
Yeah.
the oil. Why wouldn't you take care of your body and, take these supplements, which is like changing the oil? But that's what
Yeah.
I think I mean, a lot of times I try to help copywriters have that, is to develop that kind of, so they don't have to do the same thing over and over. They don't have to keep wondering, how do I make this copy not be boring? It's like, no, how do I make this copy not be boring? I grab my 5 things that, David and I developed together to make copy not be boring.
Yeah, it's very empowering. I like that a lot. Is that part of why you wrote the books that you did? Because that's a question I had for you. Because I'm thinking about writing a book potentially, and I'm thinking, where do I start? Because there's a lot to it, and you've written 2 books. So, why did you decide to write a book, and how did that process go?
Yeah, I don't, it's funny. I think sometimes you write a book just because you want to learn certain things or explore certain things, as well as wanting to convey certain things, or wanting to, how writing forces you to think things through. It's like I wanted to understand these things more clearly. And I certainly wanted to understand creativity more clearly when I wrote the book about creativity, which kind of morphed into the creativity course that I think you took a while back. Because I think that's just hugely important. Everything's about creativity in a certain way. How do you be more creative, have more options when you write an email, when you write a headline, when you write copy? Copy is constantly being creative. So, and then the book on marketing was just, I don't know, I just sort of started writing a book on marketing. I think I wanted to have something, as I recall, it was to have something to sell at a Gary North seminar. Because Gary said, okay, if you come speak at my seminar, you could sell, something. I said, okay, I'll write a book,
Nice.
which is always good to have a deadline. It's just like, okay, I need it by this day. I'm going to speak. And in fact, I'm actually in the process of revising the the marketing book, which is kind of interesting because it's forcing me to understand now how to update it in terms of AI, or to update it in terms of automation, or to update it in terms of social media. And there's a lot of stuff I know about that stuff, but in having to update every chapter of the book, every section of the book, it's forcing me to explore things that I haven't explored before in terms of more technical. I can't think of anything
That is
offhand, of course,
interesting.
but technical
Hmm.
marketing stuff that's being done that I didn't even know about. Tracking, you know, people, personalization, just all, amazing stuff. Make connections that I hadn't thought of. So and I love editing. That's probably why I like copy coaching, because I really like editing. And I think in a way, writers, well, Ogilvy once said, I'm not particularly a great writer, but I'm a hell of an editor. So I just get the copy on the page and then edit it until it's great. And, I'm kind of like that, And I think that today, in a way, we're all editors. We edit our own copy, we edit AI copy, we edit copy that we've written jointly with AI. The editing is almost the most important part, not the first draft. It's how do you get it to the next level of compelling and, actionable. And that's editing. That's changing this to this. That's, tweaking the headline. That's putting a new lead in there. That's more powerful. Like you said, realizing, no, that doesn't go here. That goes down here, and this goes up here. And
Yeah, I've definitely found that editing is the difference between good copy and great copy. I've never been able to write something that first draft that I can say, wow, this is magic. I can say it's good. I can feel it's
right.
in there, I can feel there's something good coming out. I'm like, ooh, I like this first draft. This is almost there. But I could sit with it for a few days and I know that there's so much more that's hiding inside there, Sometimes it's almost that there's the first draft, the lead I have in the first draft or the story I have in the first draft, the initial raw edit has all the energy and all the emotion that I actually want to bring to the piece, even if sometimes I take away a large part of that story because I think it's actually kind of rambling. I still feel that the copy still carries that original energy because I had that in my first draft, So it is interesting. And I've also found that when I critique copy, and as I've been coaching over the last 5 years, I've found that I've refined my understanding of marketing more from actually reviewing copy and critiquing than actually when I was writing, because now I was constantly looking at copy from the outside, not my own writing. So I didn't have as many immediate biases. I was looking at the copy from the outside, and that definitely refined the way I think about copy. But yeah, David, we could go on for a very long time. I have a lot of fun having this conversation here. I got really good ideas for how I'm going to improve I actually had an idea here based on what you were saying about creativity. I'm actually going to spend some more time coming up with, looking at movies I particularly enjoy and copy I enjoy, and actually listing down some of the ways that they actually do what they do, and pulling from that. So that I can actually use it as a reference for like when I write copy in my editing process. So thanks for that. That's great.
No, I've enjoyed our conversation.
Where can people find you if they want to learn all of your secrets and join your inner circle and see what you're up to?
Yeah, they can go to speakingofwriting.com, speakingofwriting.com, and there's a product page there that's got the directions to the inner circle on it. Or they can just go directly to speakingofwriting.com DDIC.
DDIC. Like .com/DDIC.
Yeah. And there's a free report on how I use AI on there that they can get, and that'll also take them to the page for more information about the inner circle. But if they go to my site, Speaking of Writing without the DDIC, they can get some free stuff and sign up for my newsletter and do all that good stuff.
Okay, so that's also where they can sign up for your newsletter to hear from you. Nice. Okay. All right, you heard it. Go and sign up. Go the secrets. David's been an incredible help in my career so far. I've learned a lot from you, and a lot of the stuff that helped me in the early days, I would definitely say a lot of it came from stuff that you inspired me to do through some of your work. So, if you want to get better as a copywriter, go and join, David's list and join us in a circle. Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it today. And looking forward to chatting with you again soon.
I look forward to it too. It's been my pleasure.
Thanks.